The year is 1919. The world is finally beginning to emerge from the shadow of the Great War, ultimately resulting in a victory for the Allied powers. Global superpowers across the world have finally agreed to terms of peace, beginning to focus their efforts inwards on recovering from the devastation. During this global recovery, the island nation of Japan is amidst a period of reconstruction. Japan had recognized the war as a chance to exert control over Asia, taking control of German territory in the east. Securing its position as a formidable world power, Japan maintained its territorial gains after the war. Despite its success, the war had caused Japan major economic strain. With the rising ambition of establishing an empire that could compare with Western powers, Japan looked to expand its influence on China and other parts of Asia. With the backing of decades of industrialization and inspiration from Western technology, Japan continued its conquest westward. After the Great War, a series of unfortunate events would prove to ruin the Japanese economy. In 1923, the Great Kanto earthquake devastated the Tokyo-Yokohama region. The earthquake led to the deaths of just under 150,000 people, causing over 6.5 billion yen worth of damage, 4 times the national yearly budget. In response to the earthquake, Prime Minister of Japan Hamaguchi Osachi commented on the state of the economy. Hamaguchi states that, after the war, the conditions changed significantly for the worse. Our country was severely damaged by the Great Earthquake, which further worsened the economic recession. If the situation is left unattended, we cannot expect any recovery in the future. In efforts to rebuild its economy, Japan relied on international trade, selling various goods and war materials in hopes of gaining capital. This increase in foreign trade caused pressure on their currency. When other nations decided to switch off the gold standard, Japan found the exchange rates to be far too competitive for their economy. As a result, the country collapsed into a state of hyperinflation that eventually led to a series of bankrupts and financial panics known as the Showa financial crisis of 1927. This economic depression revealed secret government ties with private businesses, causing radical right-wing politics and factions to arise against the government. These factions promoted the ideas of exceptionalism, emperor worship, and the need to secure resources through overseas expansion as a way to combat the financially incapable and untrustworthy government. In response to this economic crisis, Prime Minister Hamaguchi understood that a frugal government would be necessary for Japan to rebuild. As a gradual solution to the crisis, Hamaguchi's plan was to save as much money as the nation could. In a speech to ease tensions among Japanese citizens worried about the economic state of the nation, he explained his vision, stating, "We shrink today in order to grow tomorrow. We must have the courage to endure the minor pain at present for the purpose of great light in the future." Japanese economic woes would only increase after the start of the Great Depression, causing high unemployment rates and social unrest. In times of despair and uncertainty, the Japanese military promised stability and growth, quickly becoming an attractive option for many. Meanwhile, world powers across the globe were growing increasingly scared of the rising militant control in Japan. To prevent another deadly global war, the 1930 London Naval Conference met with a purpose to place limits on the naval military sections of the world's largest naval powers, including Japan, disarming Japan's naval fleets. Many Japanese people were upset by the limitations set upon them, contributing to the popularity of ultra-nationalistic and militaristic ideologies. The rise of nationalistic ideals further promoted Japanese superiority, aggressive expansionist policies, and the need for a strong military leadership. The new militant control of Japan, under Lieutenant Colonel Kanji Ishiwara and Army Colonel Seishiro Itagaki, held the belief that creating a conflict in China would benefit Japan's expansionist goals, allowing Japan to eventually create a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. Looking to rally the support of the Japanese people, Ishiwara explained that the destiny of the Japanese nation lies in its ability to unite Asia under its leadership. This is our historical mission and our duty. On September 18, 1931, an explosion destroyed a section of railway track near the city of Mukden. The Japanese, who owned the railway, blamed Chinese nationalists for the incident and used the opportunity to retaliate and invade Manchuria. The Chinese resistance was futile compared to the experienced Japanese soldiers and were quickly ordered to retreat. This incident, known as the Mukden Incident of 1931, marked the beginning of Japanese conquest of Manchuria. Kanji Ishiwara, the lieutenant general in charge of the Japanese role in the Mukden Incident, encouraged soldiers, saying, "Japan must be victorious. not for the sake of her own national interest, but for the salvation of the world. Eventually, Kanji Ishiwara and his officers were able to seize control of the Manchurian heartland. By 1932, Japan had fully occupied Manchuria, renaming it Manchukuo and establishing a puppet regime. From there, Japan continued to expand into China, performing bombings, lootings, massacres, and raids. The Japanese army was met with little resistance, as Chinese military commander Chiang Kai-shek was intent on establishing his control over the rest of China, ordering Chinese forces in Manchuria to pursue a policy of non-resistance and withdrawal. Eventually, China had enough of the torment brought upon by Japan, expressing their concerns to the League of Nations. With a 42-1 vote, the League of Nations ruled that the Manchukuo area would be returned to China and forced Japan out of the League of Nations. Japanese forced entry into China had ultimately led to conflict near the Marco Polo Bridge in China. In 1937, the Marco Polo Bridge incident was initiated by Japan. Japan had demanded entry into the tiny town of Wanping in order to search for one of its soldiers. The Chinese garrison in the town refused Japanese entry, resulting in shots being fired between both sides. Quickly, the fighting spread to central China, leading to successive Japanese victories, officially marking the beginning of the Second Sino-Japanese War. Further Japanese expansion into China had ultimately reached the Chinese city of Shanghai. In 1937, the Battle of Shanghai erupted, resulting in the longest and largest battle of the entire war. Despite their best efforts at resisting the Japanese forces, one of China's most important cities, Shanghai, had fallen into Japanese hands. After capturing Shanghai, the Japanese army quickly pushed through China, reaching the capital of China, Nanjing. As a result, tens of thousands of women and young girls were sexually assaulted by the Japanese. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese were killed, and babies were used as bayonet practice for the Japanese soldiers. At this point, the Japanese conquest into China had expanded into other parts of Indochina, transforming Japan into a totalitarian military dictatorship. The devastated economy and Japanese nationalism which fueled the militant control of Japan paved the way for Prime Minister Hideki Tojo, a symbol of how Japan was dominated by military control, leading to the ultimate decline of democracy in Japan. In the West, the United States had become fearful of Japanese expansion, especially in Indochina. Looking to curb Japan's military aggression in Asia, the United States imposed sanctions, preventing Japan from purchasing oil. Having lost 94% of its oil supply and unwilling to submit to US demands, Japan planned to take the oil needed by force. On December 7, 1941, Japan staged an attack on the US Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, hoping that the US would negotiate peace and retract its sanctions on Japan. However, the Japanese plan quickly backfired, causing the US to declare war on Japan, facilitating American entry into World War II. By the end of the interwar period, Japan had shifted from democracy to militarism and authoritarianism, driven by economic struggles and nationalist sentiment. Japan's economic struggles and its intense militaristic ideals led to a need for expansion among its government and people, eventually leading to foreign opposition against Japanese expansion. China had been devastated by Japanese invasion, and parts of Indochina had been too. Japan had caused international relations between the global powers to shift, leading to change in trade, economics, and foreign policy. These changes would eventually set the stage for Japan's aggressive actions in World War II.